This story begins deep in the wild. A lion cub's desperate cry cuts through the savannah air, echoing like a call for help no one can ignore. The dry wind carries the sound across golden grass, through acacia shadows, until it reaches your ears, sharp, trembling, impossible to mistake. Somewhere out there, a life is slipping away. In this unforgiving land, survival is never guaranteed. Every sunset hides a story of struggle. Every dawn opens a new test of endurance. You stop in your tracks, heart pounding, trying to locate the source of that cry, and then you see it. A massive lioness, her golden coat streaked with blood and dust, lies half hidden near a thorn bush. Her breathing is ragged. Her belly moves, swollen, heavy with life. She's pregnant and barely holding on. So before we dive in, take a moment to more like this video. And if this story touches your heart, subscribe to Heroic Rescue Tales. Together, we'll keep the spirit of compassion alive, one rescue at a time. Comment below your favorite animal, because every creature has a story worth telling. You step closer slowly, every instinct screaming caution. Her eyes flicker open, golden, fierce, yet filled with pain. She tries to rise, but her leg gives out. Deep gashes run across her flank, claw marks that tell of a violent encounter. Maybe a territorial fight, maybe poachers. The soil around her is marked by chaos, paw prints, blood, drag lines. She's fought for her life and lost, but there's more. You notice faint movement beside her, a tuft of fur, a half-buried cub no older than a few hours, still breathing. The lioness shifts, covering it weakly with her paw, refusing to abandon her child even as her strength fades. A mother's will to protect, even when death stands close. The sun beats down mercilessly. Flies swarm. You scan the horizon, no signs of other lions, but vultures are circling overhead. The air hums with the heavy silence of approaching danger. You realize the truth. If you walk away now, both mother and unborn cubs will be gone before the next hour. You drop to your knees beside her, whispering gently, letting her scent you. She doesn't snarl. She only breathes, shallow, labored, trusting for reasons you can't understand. Somewhere deep inside, she seems to know, this time the human isn't the threat. He's the only hope left. As the wind rustles through the tall grass, your hand trembles. The decision ahead could mean your life or hers. The cub cries again, soft, fading. The lioness lifts her head, eyes pleading, as if asking one final question, will you help me? But from behind the rocks something moves. A shape, low, silent, deliberate, watching. You freeze. You're not alone out here. Deep but in the tall grass something stirred. Yay! The air grows heavy as you crouch beside the wounded lioness, her shallow breaths counting down the seconds she has left. Every instinct inside you says to back away, to return to your jeep and call for help. But there's no signal, only the low growl of thunder in the distance and the hum of insects filling the silence. The savannah stretches endlessly, golden and empty, yet filled with invisible eyes. Somewhere out there her pride could be watching. You glance toward the horizon, faint shadows moving in the heat haze, shapes that could be lions or just your fear playing tricks. Either way, the choice is now. If you walk away, she dies. If you stay, you might not live long enough to see help arrive. You tear open your backpack, pulling out the small medical kit you always carry, just gauze, antiseptic, and a half-empty water bottle. It feels pitifully inadequate. You pour water over her wounds and she flinches, but doesn't lash out. Her trust, even in this moment of agony, stirs something inside you, an ancient understanding that transcends language. This creature, feared by many, revered by some, is a mother fighting for her unborn cubs. You realize that nature's fiercest predator can also be its most vulnerable soul. You scan her injuries. Deep claw tears along her hind leg, a broken paw, dehydration setting in fast. She tries to lift her head again, watching you closely, her golden eyes flickering between pain and curiosity. Then another sound, a faint rustle to your left. You turn sharply. 2 hyenas lurk at the edge of the clearing, drawn by the scent of blood. Their laughter cuts through the wind, mocking, confident. You know they're waiting for her to die. They've seen this scene before, the end of strength, the start of scavenging. Your pulse races. You pick up a nearby branch, wave it, yell, throw a rock, anything to drive them off. One retreats a few steps, the other circles, eyes glowing with hunger. You shout again, voice breaking, adrenaline taking over. Finally, they slink away into the grass, but their presence lingers, a reminder that every moment counts. You kneel beside the lioness again, hands shaking, and tear your shirt into strips to bandage her wounds. The bleeding slows, but not enough. You whisper, "Stay with me, girl. Just a little longer." She blinks once, slow, steady, as if she understands. The first drops of rain begin to fall, warm, thick and heavy. A storm is coming. You can hear it rolling across the plains, rumbling like the growl of an approaching pride. You try your phone again. Still no signal. You check your watch. Hours have passed. The temperature is dropping. Lightning flashes on the horizon, and for a moment you see something that makes your breath catch, the silhouette of a lion standing on a ridge, watching you. It's not the lioness's mate, it's a rival male. If he comes closer, you won't stand a chance. Your mind races between choices. Leave her and live, or stay and fight against nature itself. But when you look back at her, you see the faintest movement, her paw shifting protectively over her belly, as if shielding the cubs within. You can't abandon that. You just can't. You take a deep breath, grit your teeth, and prepare to do what no one else would dare, to save a dying lioness in the middle of the storm, alone. The wind howls. The rain thickens. The world shrinks to the space between your heartbeat and hers. Then somewhere behind you, a low growl rises through the thunder, deep, powerful, and close. But through the darkness, a roar answers from the ridge. Buzz! The first thunderclap shatters the silence, rolling across the plains like a warning from the heavens. The scent of rain mixes with blood and earth, and the wind begins to howl through the tall grass. You know this storm isn't just weather, it's a test. The sky darkens quickly, swallowing the horizon, and you can barely see more than a few meters ahead. The lioness trembles, her breaths uneven, her body weak from blood loss and exhaustion. You press your hand against her side, feeling the faint rise and fall of her ribcage, a fragile rhythm, fighting to hold on. She's slipping away, and the cubs inside her are running out of time. You scan the area desperately, searching for anything that could shield her from the rain. The ground is uneven, dotted with termite mounds and thorny bushes. Finally, you spot a cluster of rocks nearby, half covered in vines, a shallow cavity just deep enough to serve as shelter. It's not much, but it's the only chance you have. You slide your arms under her neck, careful not to startle her, and she lets out a soft, pained growl. Her eyes meet yours, tired, wild, untrusting, yet still full of something that feels like hope. You whisper softly, "It's okay. I've got you." The rain intensifies, drumming against your back as you strain to pull her inch by inch toward the rocky hollow. The ground turns slick beneath your boots, and twice you nearly lose your grip, but you don't stop. Lightning flashes again, illuminating the landscape in ghostly white. You glimpse movement in the distance, maybe a hyena, maybe worse. Every instinct tells you to move faster. Finally, you reach the hollow and lower her gently inside. The cave is small, the air thick with the smell of wet fur and iron. You tear more fabric from your clothes to clean her wounds again, then light a small emergency flare. The dim orange glow flickers over her coat, giving her a ghostly warmth. You pull your phone out again and dial every emergency ranger contact you can remember. Static, then silence. The storm has cut all signals. You're alone. The thought hits hard, but there's no time to despair. You pour the last of your water into her mouth, drop by drop, until she finally swallows. It's a tiny victory. One breath more, one heartbeat closer to survival. Outside, the thunder roars like an army of drums, echoing across the plains. You glance out and see rivers forming where there were none minutes ago. The savannah is turning into a floodplain, and if the water reaches your shelter, it could drown you both. You dig small trenches with your hands, guiding the flow away from her body, ignoring the pain and the mud seeping into your skin. Every second feels endless. Somewhere above, a bolt of lightning strikes an acacia tree, setting it ablaze for a moment before the rain snuffs it out. The lioness jerks at the sound, her eyes wide, muscles tense. You place a hand on her shoulder, murmuring softly to calm her. The flare flickers, then dies, plunging you into near darkness. Only the sound of her breathing remains. Then through the rain and wind, a distant roar pierces the night. Not thunder, not the wind, but a lion's call. Deep, commanding, and close. You freeze. Your heart races as the lioness lifts her head weakly, answering with a faint growl. It's him, her mate, or perhaps her rival. Either way, he's coming closer. You peer out into the storm, trying to see, but the rain blinds you. The savannah has turned into chaos, thunder above, predators around, and a dying lioness depending on you. You tighten your grip on the flare stick, ready to ignite another if needed. In this moment, under the wrath of nature, one truth cuts through everything. Her life and the lives she carries now rest in your trembling hands. The next flash of lightning reveals two glowing eyes in the rain, fixed on you from the darkness, and they're moving closer. But then another roar answered, and this one was closer than before. The storm raged on through the endless night, a deafening orchestra of thunder and wind that seemed determined to erase everything in its path. You crouched beside the lioness, your heart pounding in rhythm with every flash of lightning. The small rocky hollow had become your sanctuary and your prison. The rainwater pooled around your knees, carrying mud, insects, and the faint metallic scent of blood. Every instinct screamed to leave, to escape the wrath of nature and the predators lurking beyond the curtain of rain. But then you looked at her, the lioness, trembling, half-conscious, her golden coat slick with rain and life ebbing with every labored breath. And you knew you couldn't move. Not now, not when her cubs still stirred faintly inside her. Her breathing had turned shallow, erratic. You pressed your ear close to her chest. Her heartbeat was faint, irregular, slowing. You whispered softly, trying to steady your shaking hands. "Stay with me, girl, please. You're almost there." You reached for the small emergency kit again, your fingers numb and clumsy from cold. There wasn't much left, just a strip of gauze, some antiseptic, and a single injection of pain reliever meant for small animals. You didn't know if it would help, but you couldn't just watch her fade away. You cleaned her wounds as gently as possible, wincing as she flinched at every touch. Her tail flicked weakly, her muscles twitching. It was a good sign. She still felt pain, and pain meant life. Outside, a roar echoed, closer now, unmistakably lion. You froze, every nerve on alert. The sound rolled across the savannah like thunder, followed by an answering call in the far distance. The pride. They were near. You turned your eyes to the darkened entrance of the hollow, barely visible through the pouring rain. Two pinpoints of golden light gleamed back at you for a second, eyes reflecting the lightning, then disappeared into the night. You tightened your grip on the flare stick, your only defense. If they found you here, trapped beside their wounded queen, you wouldn't stand a chance. You whispered again to her, voice trembling. "They're close. You have to stay quiet, okay? You're safe. I promise." The words felt absurd, a human promising safety to a lioness in the middle of the African wild. But promises had power, even when they were made to the dying. Minutes blurred into hours. You fought to keep her awake, shaking her gently whenever her breathing slowed. You used your jacket to cover her wounds from the rain, your body hunched over hers to shield her from the cold. The storm howled on, relentless. Then something changed. She moved. Her muscles tensed, her body convulsed, and a low, guttural moan escaped her throat. You realized what was happening. She wasn't just fighting for her life anymore. She was going into labor. Panic surged through you. It was too soon, too violent. The stress, the injuries, they had forced it. You didn't know what to do, only that you had to stay. Her roars echoed through the storm, shaking the air around you. Every cry tore through you, raw and powerful. You wiped the rain from her eyes, whispered calm words, and prayed she would hold on long enough. Then through the chaos, a small sound pierced the noise. A tiny whimper, fragile but alive. You leaned closer and saw it. A cub, slick and trembling, struggling to breathe beside her. You wrap the newborn in your hands, clearing its mouth gently, trying to keep it warm. The lioness turned her head weakly toward you, eyes clouded but aware. For a moment, predator and human locked eyes in shared understanding. Life had been born in the middle of death's storm. You placed the cub near her, and she pulled it close with a trembling paw, licking it weakly. But the thunder didn't stop, and neither did the danger. The scent of blood would draw others soon. You could already hear the distant laughter of hyenas on the wind, closing in again. The rain masked your scent, but not for long. You tightened your grip on the flare, ready to defend this fragile miracle with everything you had. The lioness's breathing steadied slightly, her body trembling but alive. You looked out into the blackness beyond the cave, rain blurring your vision, and saw movement again. Silhouettes, 3, maybe 4 shapes, slinking closer through the grass, their eyes gleaming faintly in the flashes of lightning. And from the shadows the hunters began to close in. The storm had not relented, and neither had the night. Sheets of rain slashed through the air, as if the heavens themselves were testing the limits of your courage. You knelt beside the lioness, drenched to the bone, your heartbeat pounding in your ears like a drum of survival. The newborn cub nestled weakly against its mother's side, its tiny whimpers drowned by the thunder. The lioness, exhausted and in agony, fought to stay conscious, her body convulsing with every wave of pain. You realized with horror that the birth wasn't over. She was carrying more cubs, and the stress, the wounds, the storm, they were tearing her apart. You wiped the rain from your eyes, your breath clouding in the cold air. The hyenas' laughter grew louder now, closer. Their shapes flickered through the lightning, lean bodies moving low and fast across the grass. There were at least 5 of them. They had waited long enough. The scent of blood was too strong, the promise of an easy meal too tempting. You gritted your teeth, grabbing the flare stick, fumbling with the lighter as your fingers shook uncontrollably. The first spark failed. The second caught. A hiss, then a burst of orange flame roared to life, casting a circle of trembling light across the cave mouth. The hyenas froze at the edge of the glow, their eyes reflecting back like shards of glass. You shouted, waving the flare wildly, "Get back!" Your voice was hoarse, barely audible over the storm. One hyena lunged forward, snarling. You hurled a rock, striking it hard enough to make it retreat. Another circle left, testing you, fearless in hunger. You stepped forward, shielding the lioness and her cub. Behind you she let out a roar, weak but defiant. The sound rolled through the air like thunder itself, the voice of a mother protecting her young. It was enough to make the scavengers hesitate, but not enough to make them leave. Then another sound cut through the chaos, a deeper roar, far more powerful, closer than ever before. You turned toward the darkness, your breath catching. A massive lion's silhouette emerged through the rain, broad shoulders, wild mane, eyes like fire. The rival male. You couldn't tell if he was her mate or an opportunist, drawn by blood. Either way, his presence changed everything. The hyenas scattered instantly, their laughter fading into the distance. But your relief turned to fear when he turned his gaze toward you. The lion took a slow step forward, his growl deep, resonant, dangerous. The lioness stirred, lifting her head, and for the first time you saw a spark of recognition in her eyes. She looked toward the male, then back at you, then toward her cub, as if torn between instinct and memory. Her paw moved protectively over her newborn. The male's gaze softened slightly, his growl lowering to a low rumble. He seemed to understand. This wasn't prey. This was something else. You stayed perfectly still, the flare burning low in your hand, hissing softly in the rain. The lion sniffed the air, then turned toward the lioness, letting out a low, guttural sound, a call almost gentle. She responded weakly, a short rumble of recognition. The moment was fragile, sacred, the storm raging outside, the predators gone, and life being born within the hollow. You felt as though time itself had stopped to witness it. Then, with one final roar of pain, the lioness gave birth again. Another cub, slick and trembling, slid into the mud. You caught it instinctively, your heart in your throat. The lion stepped closer, his massive form blocking the wind, his presence strangely protective rather than threatening. You placed the second cub near its mother, who immediately began to lick it weakly, her body trembling but still alive. The male lion's gaze met yours again, no longer hostile but cautious, almost grateful. You backed away slowly, letting him take his place beside her. The storm began to ease, the rain softening into a steady drizzle. Lightning flashed one final time across the sky, and for a brief second, the scene looked almost divine. A man, a lion, and a mother giving life under the fire of the storm. You exhaled a breath you didn't realize you were holding. The impossible had happened. She had given birth in the middle of a tempest, surrounded by death, protected by the very force of nature that once sought to destroy her. You slumped back against the rocks, drenched and exhausted, your body trembling from the cold and adrenaline. The lioness nuzzled her cubs, her breathing heavy but steady. The male stood guard at the entrance, his silhouette outlined by lightning, a silent sentinel of the night. You looked at the mother, her golden eyes now calm, filled with quiet strength. For the first time in hours, you allowed yourself to believe that she might make it. But as your eyelids grew heavy, you noticed something that chilled your blood. Beyond the ridge, under the flickering light of the storm, more shapes were moving, silent, patient, waiting. The pride was returning, and before dawn, they would all be there. The storm finally began to break as dawn crept over the horizon. The thunder rolled away into the distance, leaving behind the heavy hush of a drenched savannah. A soft mist hung low over the grass, and the air was cool, alive with the scent of wet earth. You sat just inside the rocky hollow, your body aching, your clothes soaked, every muscle heavy with exhaustion. The lioness lay before you, breathing shallow but steady, her two newborn cubs pressed close against her chest. Their tiny sides rose and fell in unison, fragile heartbeats echoing the miracle that had unfolded only hours earlier. Beside her, the massive male lion stood like a statue, his mane glistening with rain, his golden eyes never leaving you. The world felt still, but only for a moment. Then you heard it, faint at first, then clearer, growing closer with each passing second. Low, rumbling growls, soft chuffs carried by the wind. The rest of the pride was returning. You could see them now through the early light, silhouettes moving through the mist, 6 or 7 strong, their powerful bodies gliding silently through the grass. Females, young males, and cubs from other litters. The pride was coming home, drawn by instinct, by scent, by the sound of their leader's call. Your pulse quickened. You knew what this meant? A pride's bond was fierce, but so was its suspicion. If they found a human crouched beside their wounded queen, they might see you as a threat, or worse, prey. You looked toward the lioness. Her eyes flickered open, following your gaze. She seemed to sense it too. With great effort, she lifted her head, let out a low rumble, a call of reassurance, a warning, or both. The male lion responded with a deep growl of his own, short and commanding. The approaching figures paused, then began to move slower, more cautiously. You crouched lower, your breath shallow. The flare burned out beside you, leaving only dim morning light. Your heart thudded in your chest as one of the lionesses, younger, strong, her golden coat still slick with rain, stepped forward, nose twitching. She was only a few yards away now, her eyes locked on you, cold and curious. You stayed perfectly still, trying to appear smaller, non-threatening, every instinct screaming for you to run, though you knew it would be the last thing you ever did. The lioness sniffed the air again, then turned her gaze toward the wounded queen and her cubs. Something shifted in her posture, recognition, perhaps understanding. She gave a short chuff, and the others hesitated behind her. The male lion gave a low rumble, a sound of authority that rippled through the pride like an unspoken command. The young lioness stepped back. The tension that had gripped the air slowly began to ease. You exhaled a shaky breath, barely daring to believe it. They were accepting you, if only for this moment. You moved slightly, inching toward your pack. The male's head snapped toward you instantly, a low growl rumbling in his chest. You froze, raising your hands slowly, palms open. "It's okay," you whispered. "I'm leaving." You picked up your bag and backed away carefully, step by step. The pride's eyes followed your every move. The lioness watched you too, her gaze softer, tired but filled with something that resembled gratitude. It was as though she understood what you had done, the pain, the risk, the sleepless nights spent battling death itself. Finally, you were outside the hollow, standing in the golden light of dawn. The rain had stopped completely. You turned once more to look back. The pride was gathered around her now, forming a protective circle. The cubs whimpered softly, their tiny cries answered by deep purrs from the others. The male lion sat at the edge, watching you one last time, before turning his attention back to his family. You took a deep breath, every nerve still trembling, and began the long walk back toward your jeep miles away. Behind you, the savannah came alive again, birds calling, insects buzzing, the sun breaking through the clouds. You didn't look back again, but the image stayed with you. A wounded queen restored, her family reunited, her cubs safe. Yet even as you walked, a single question echoed in your mind. If the pride had returned now, what would happen when humans came looking for them again? Poachers, rangers, wanderers, this land was never free from danger. And you knew deep down that your story with her wasn't over yet. Because somewhere in that golden grass, the lioness who had once been helpless now stood again, not as a victim, but as the queen she was born to be. But peace in the wild never lasts long, and destiny wasn't done with them yet. The following morning, the savannah was reborn under a rising sun. The storm had washed the world clean. Every blade of grass shimmered with dew, and a thin mist curled across the plains like breath from the earth itself. You trudged through the muddy trail, every step heavy, your body aching from exhaustion and cold. Your clothes were torn, soaked, caked in dirt. But inside you burned a quiet fire, the fire of survival, of having witnessed something sacred. You had seen life return where death had nearly won. You had saved a mother, and in turn, she had saved something inside you. As you climbed a small ridge, you finally spotted it. The distant shimmer of metal, the outline of your jeep, really flooded through you like sunlight. You hurried forward, fumbling for the radio, static, then a crackle, a faint voice. You shouted into the receiver, your voice hoarse but urgent. "This is Ranger Station 12. I found a wounded lioness. She's alive with cubs. I need immediate medical assistance." Coordinates. You repeated them twice before the signal faded. Moments later, the voice came back clearer. "Copy that. Stay put. We're sending a rescue team." Hours passed before you saw them. 2 ranger trucks cutting through the tall grass, dust trailing behind their tires. You waved both arms, signaling. When they reached you, the rangers jumped out, faces hard but eyes wide with disbelief. You led them to the hollow. As they approached, their radios crackled with low voices, the tone shifting from urgency to awe. The pride was still there, the lioness resting with her newborn cubs, the massive male standing guard at the mouth of the cave. The rangers slowed, weapons lowered, their movements cautious. One of them, a grizzled veteran named Harris, muttered, "I've worked 20 years in these plains. Never seen anything like this." His voice trembled slightly as he lowered his binoculars. "You stayed with her through the storm?" You nodded silently. He stared at you for a long moment, shaking his head. "You're either insane or blessed. Maybe both." You motioned for them to keep their distance, whispering, "She trusts me. Don't scare her." The rangers hesitated, then agreed to wait, crouching quietly in the grass. The lioness stirred at the movement, lifting her head. Her golden eyes found you first, not the rangers, not the trucks, not the rifles, but you. For a heartbeat, time froze. You felt her gaze pierce straight through every wall you'd ever built between man and nature. There was no fear in her eyes now, only recognition. Then something happened that none of you could explain. The lioness slowly pushed herself up onto trembling legs. The rangers whispered in shock. She should have been too weak to move. But she did, taking one careful step forward, then another, until she stood between you and the pride. The male lion let out a low growl, uncertain, but didn't move to stop her. She limped closer, stopping just a few feet away. The air was thick with tension. One wrong movement, and this could turn deadly. But instead, she lowered her massive head slightly, eyes locked on yours. Your breath caught. Every instinct screamed to back away, but you didn't. You held your ground, your heart pounding so hard you could hear it in your ears. She took another step, slow, deliberate, and then did something that left every ranger speechless. She pressed her forehead gently against your chest. For a moment you forgot to breathe. The touch was heavy, rough with strength, yet soft with intent. You froze, tears welling unbidden as the weight of that moment sank in. She was saying something. Something words could never hold: gratitude, trust, recognition. The same creature that would tear a man apart in defense of her cubs now stood before you in silent peace. When she stepped back, the male lion let out a low rumble, as if calling her home. She turned, gave one last look, and limped back to her pride. The cubs mewed softly, the others shifting to make room as she lay beside them again. The rangers stood frozen, no one daring to speak. It was Harris who finally whispered, "She thanked you." You exhaled, hands trembling, trying to find words that didn't exist. The savannah was still, the wind barely stirring. You watched her from afar, knowing you might never experience a moment like that again. In that single gesture, a wall older than time had fallen. The line between human and wild had blurred. The rangers loaded their equipment back into the trucks, still shaken by what they'd seen. As you climbed aboard, you looked back one last time. The pride was already moving, melting into the tall grass. The lioness turned her head briefly, one final glance, and then vanished into the golden haze. You sat silently as the trucks rolled away, the rhythmic hum of the engine fading beneath the sound of the wind. The storm had taken much, but it had left something far greater, a bond that would never be broken. But in the silence of the savannah, a distant roar reminded you their story and yours was far from over. Weeks passed, and the savannah's scars began to fade beneath the rhythm of life. The rains had returned balance to the land, and word of the miraculous rescue spread quietly among the rangers. The Lioness was taken to a wildlife rehabilitation center near the reserve's edge, a safe haven surrounded by acacia trees and golden plains stretching as far as the eye could see. Under the careful hands of veterinarians and conservationists, her wounds healed day by day. The cubs thrived beside her, growing stronger, their playful cries echoing through the compound like music after a long silence. You visited often, always standing at a respectful distance. The first time you saw her after the rescue, she was resting in the shade, her golden fur now clean and glistening. The moment she lifted her head and met your eyes, something in your chest tightened. Her gaze was calm, familiar, the same silent strength you had seen that night under the storm. She remembered. The rangers noticed it too. "She only reacts to him," Harris murmured once, shaking his head. "Any other man, and she growls. Him, she just watches." Days turned into weeks. You spent hours watching her from across the fence, sketching notes, recording her progress for the wildlife department. Sometimes the cubs would tumble near the barrier, their innocent curiosity drawing laughter from the staff. The lioness would rise, nudge them back gently, and look toward you as if to say, "They're safe now." Each day you visited, you spoke softly to her, not expecting her to understand the words, but knowing somehow she did. "You're strong now," you whispered one evening, as the sun bled into the horizon. "You don't need me anymore." Then one morning everything changed. The keepers found the gate to her enclosure slightly ajar. There was no struggle, no blood, no sign of distress, only paw prints leading toward the open plains. The cubs were gone too. She hadn't escaped in fear or chaos. She had simply left. The rangers searched for days, but found nothing except tracks that led toward the distant hills and vanished into the wild grass. You returned to the empty enclosure, the silence pressing heavy around you. Her absence felt larger than her presence ever had. Harris approached quietly, placing a hand on your shoulder. "She went home," he said softly. "Some creatures aren't meant to stay behind fences." You gave her back what she lost, freedom. You nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun dipped low, painting the sky with fire. Somewhere out there, she roamed free again, her cubs growing into the kings and queens of tomorrow's savannah. You smiled faintly, whispering to the wind, "Goodbye, old girl." You made it. The grass swayed gently, and for a moment, just a heartbeat, you thought you heard that familiar rumble again, faint and deep, carried by the evening breeze. But sometimes the wild doesn't say farewell. It simply moves on. Months later, the sun dipped low over the savannah once more. The world was quiet now, no thunder, no storms, only the steady hum of life beneath an amber sky. You returned to that same place where it had all begun, the rocky hollow half hidden by tall grass. The wind carried the scent of dust and wildflowers, and the golden light turned the plains into a sea of fire. You stood there, still and silent, listening to the whispers of the land. Every sound felt like an echo of that night, the roar, the rain, the heartbeat of the lioness you had once saved. You set down your pack and took a slow breath. The world around you was peaceful, but inside, a quiet hope stirred. Maybe she was still out there, somewhere beyond the hills, ruling the wild with her cubs by her side. The thought brought a small smile to your face. Then, just as the sun touched the horizon, a movement caught your eye. A familiar shape emerging from the golden haze. There she was, the lioness. Her coat glowed like molten gold in the dying light, her eyes steady and alive. 3 cubs followed close behind, nearly grown now, their steps sure and strong. She paused on the ridge, looking directly at you. The air between you shimmered with that same unspoken bond, the same gratitude, the same trust. For a long, timeless moment, neither of you moved. You didn't need to. The silence said everything. Then with one graceful motion, she turned and walked away, her cubs trailing behind her, vanishing into the tall grass as the last rays of sunlight faded. You watched until they were gone, the world bathed in gold and quiet. A deep peace settled over the land, the kind that only comes when everything has found its place again. The danger had passed, peace had returned, and the savannah rested once more.